Richard Wright was born Richard Nathaniel Wright on Rutgers Plantation, Mississippi. His father Nathaniel Wright was an illiterate sharecropper and his mother Ella Wright was a schoolteacher.
His father left the family when Richard was only 5 years old. At that time, him and his brother spent time at an orphanage.
Around 1920, Ella Wright became a paralytic, and the family moved from city to city, eventually ending up with the Wrights' maternal grandparents.
This unfortunately eventful childhood led to his depressing writing style and common theme of anguish.
Wright's maternal grandparents were restrictive Seventh-day Adventists.
Wright moved from school to school, graduating from the 9th grade at the Smith Robertson Junior High School in Jackson as a class valedictorian.
His staunchly religious and illiterate grandmother, Margaret Bolden Wilson, kept books out of the house and thought fiction was the work of the devil. Wright kept any aspirations he had to be a writer to himself after his first experience with publication.
After grade school, Wright attended Lanier High School, but dropped out after a few weeks to work. He took a series of odd jobs to save enough money to leave for Memphis, which he did at age 17.
He began to read contemporary American literature as well as commentary by H. L. Mencken, which struck him with particular force. As Wright reveals in his autobiography, Black Boy, he borrowed the library card of an Irish co-worker and forged notes to the librarian so he could read, "Dear Madam, will you please let this nigger boy have some books by H. L. Mencken?"
Determined to leave the South before he would irretrievably overstep the bounds of Jim Crow restrictions on blacks, Wright took the train to Chicago in December 1927.
In Chicago, Wright worked at the post office, at Michael Reese Hospital, taking care of lab animals, and as an insurance agent, among other jobs. There, in 1932, he became involved in the John Reed Club as an intellectual arm of the Communist Party, which he joined the next March. By 1935, he found work with the Federal Negro Theater in Chicago under the Federal Writers Project. He wrote some short stories and a novel during this time, but they were not published until after his death.
Wright's literary career was launched when his short story collection, Uncle Tom's Children, won first prize for the Story Magazine contest open to Federal Writers Project authors for Best Book-Length Manuscript.
In Native Son, Wright presents his Guilt of the Nations thesis. His main character, Bigger Thomas, is a 19-year-old edgy small-time criminal from Chicago's South Side ghetto. The novel races with no stops in between the three parts. Book 1, Fear. Book 2, Fight. And Book 3, Fate.
The synopsis of the story will not be read, as to not give away any information to prospective readers.
While Wright made blacks proud of his success, he also made them uncomfortable with the protagonist Bigger, who is a stereotype of the brute Negro they had been trying to overcome with novels of uplift by the talented 10th since the Gilded Age. Wright's argument is that racist America created Bigger, therefore America had better change or more Biggers would be out there. Native Son continues to be regarded as Wright's greatest novel and most influential book. As a result, he has been called the father of Black American literature, a figure with whom writers such as James Baldwin had to contend.
In 1946, Wright embarked to France and after a pleasant 6 months returned to New York. After he returned to the United States, he decided he could no longer tolerate the racism he experienced even in New York City. Married to a white woman and living in the North, he still was not able to buy an apartment as a black man. Furthermore, he hated the stares he and his family received on the streets, and he was still called boy by some shopkeepers. So in 1947, he permanently moved to France and settled in Paris. Wright never again saw the United States and worked during 1949 to 1951 on a film version of Native Son, in which he himself played Bigger. The original 1993 edition of Native Son saddles readers with an even less sympathetic Bigger Thomas, ensuring this novel's role in confronting future generations of compliant Americans about the scourge of race and fulfilling W.E.B. Du Bois' prophecy in the souls of black folk, that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. Now here is a 4-minute video on the effects that Richard Wright had on racism in the African American community.
It was Wright who was one of the people who made me conscious of the need to struggle. You understand what I mean? Even though later I come up and say, well, man, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Still, in the sense of him describing and analyze the whole existence of black people as an oppressed nation, that's priceless.
I was scared. All my life I heard of black men being killed because of white girls, and there I was.
Richard Wright proved that a black writer could write considerably better than most of the white writers of his day. And after Native Son, the condescending attitude toward black writers was over.
He said, nothing comes before my art. For him, his art was sacred. He didn't care about anything else but that. What he had to do was the most important thing.
Few people, I think, can imagine what it had to be like to live under conditions of not only repression, tremendous racist discrimination, but no outlet for talking about it, for seeing a way of changing.
In the early 1940s, I would say that most white Americans never thought about blacks. They never thought about blacks except maybe as maids and porters. And there was no consciousness of what was going on in the country.
They had been objects, they had been photographs, they had been images, they had been simply voiceless.
White people only knew black people in certain kinds of movies and films. It was black musicals, it was Shuffle Along, the comic routines, it was the wonderful jazz music, of course. I mean, what people talk about in terms of the Harlem Renaissance, the jazz age. All of that was part of or created an imagery of black people that Wright had to transform.
When Native Son came out, all of a sudden, bam, it hit him right between the eyes.
I said he came like a sledgehammer, like a giant out of the mountain with a sledgehammer, writing with a sledgehammer.
I saw the book right after it had come out. I'm sure it wasn't even on the stands. I simply stopped existing. I missed school for at least a week. I couldn't function for 2 weeks.
Black people had no opportunity to say what it is they needed to say. And so the fact that he discovered that one could do it in writing and do it ever so articulately meant that millions of people could now have a voice through him.
And he was so fired up by what he was doing. One of the things, characteristics of Wright was his determination and stubbornness.
What stunned American readers about Native Son was its searing indictment of racism. This was unprecedented in 1940. Equally astonishing for the time, it was written by a Negro, the radical young writer Richard Wright. Wright said he gave Native Son everything he had because once America read it, he might never get another chance. It became a runaway bestseller, and he became one of the nation's most celebrated authors.